Three, two, one, let's go! Skippo!
Dude, first successful interview down.
Yes.
We're up to number
Look
2.
at Boris. He liked it. Boris, I don't know why you didn't chime in. We needed you on that.
We needed that Boris energy in here.
Dr. Gurevich, welcome to the Icon Live with PBE podcast. We're going to talk to you about your career, your academics. How did this all get started? I mean,
So I come from Russia. I will not tell you which year I graduated. that's a bit embarrassing. But suffice to say, I was born and raised in the Soviet Union, behind the Iron Curtain. And if somebody told me that I will be working somewhere in Australia and giving a talk about this in San Antonio, I would be just astounded, because I never heard of this. The San Antonio I only heard in one song in Russian. There was, but I didn't know where it was. It just was one nice song, sort of country, sort of like Russian song, but or maybe more like, and.
So you graduate and you go straight into geophysics. What's your degree?
Yeah, so I had the degree in geophysics, but my early work in PhD was extremely theoretical, and I thought even though there's kind of a lot of potential, I didn't know how to break this into something relevant to the industry,
right.
And it snowballs. So I couldn't believe that I'll work. I mean, you have to work with people who understand practical problems. You have to work with the and the field evolved. In the field of rock physics, that I was blessed to meet very good people in the beginning of my career. Then my mentors that basically had a very sound grounding in the theoretical side of things, and equip you. And when you have a good theoretical background, it kind of helps you to get on with whatever range of problems you are dealing with. But early on, this rock physics was theory, and nobody knew how to kind of do beyond the very simplistic geometrical models. But nowadays, what the challenge is still there to connect to the real observations, at least the advanced models. And so what we're trying to do basically is connected to geological information. That's very challenging in terms of constraining your advanced rock physics with geological information. There are great tools out there in terms of like in a full well-formed version of seismic data that gives you a higher resolution of the information about the rocks. But it's still, the scale is completely different from what we work with. We work with the little rock samples. So there's scale to bridge, a lot of work still to do. The other thing that is a challenge nowadays is the unconventional. The rock physics has not really kept pace with the unconventional revolution in oil and gas industry,
right. Yeah.
And so we have to get there as well. And I mean, I know
so where do you think that pitfall is? Why is it taken so long for rock physics to be utilized at unconventionals?
First of all, it's our fault. We like to live in the comfort zone. I know that some people broken out of that. I have not, frankly. Maybe I have an excuse that we don't really develop unconventional reservoirs in Australia. But I mean, there's no excuse. You want to be in your comfort zone. But there's another issues. Other issues have to do with the business model and the proliferation of drilling, and how the seismic can add value is not really clear.
Yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to listening to some talks on this in the next few days. I've just was sitting in my hotel room looking at all the programs and marking the unconventional talks. But I think we're still in early days. Then maybe data-driven approaches will also complement more the conventional sort of physics-grounded approaches. I will be cautious not switching off all the way to that, because I don't think there's enough data to constrain it sufficiently. But maybe there's some help from the data-driven approaches as well. So these kind of approaches will take over. But my feeling is the rock physics has a bright future still.
Yeah.
Right, of course. Like you call it the crossroads for us in
the
this
crossing
industry.
guard for
Crossing
the
guard,
crossing
that's
guard
right.
between disciplines. It's rock physics kind of lives in this space in between geology and engineering, and it's a really in that space, right? A good rock physicist, for example, we're a good friend of the show, Dr. Lev Vernick. He can explain to a reservoir engineer exactly what's going on in his model, and he can explain to a geologist what's going on in his model. And I think that in itself is extremely valuable.
Yeah, but above all, the biggest problem, the biggest challenge in unconventional for rock physicists is not just the business models and the comfort zone. It's also whether the seismic is actually sensitive to the key parameters. And in some cases it isn't. We have to be also realistic about saying no sometimes.
Right.
I mean, maybe you working in a service company is very hard to do that. But I think if we need the respect from the clients, we need to be very clear that here it will work and here it won't work. And I try to work with the Chinese companies. I go there every year.
How'd that go?
And that's very interesting. But they say we are developing. We need AVO inversion. They say 4 kilometers depth, and it's a 3% porosity. And can you help us do the AVO inversion? And I said, no. But why do you want to do that? I mean, why do you want to develop such a very expensive field and stuff? Well, it's China, so they have different priorities. The government says you have to, and you do. But
well, the shareholders say we have to.
Maybe you can, and maybe the cost of drilling versus the cost of gas. It's all gas. Is different equation there. But don't need to do AVO inversion. Of course, people don't want to lose their jobs. They say, how can you help? And we are kind of looking how we can not solve the problem, but help constrain the problem. So there's always a ways to deal with that.
That's a great approach.
I think another key issue with the unconventionals is as we're finding out now that not every reservoir is the same, especially because you step 10, 15 acres away, all of a sudden the changes within that reservoir, it's unbelievable.
Thanks to the geologic model, we have problems in this industry on all fronts. But certainly being on the front lines of rock physics, like you are, is a very interesting perspective, and how you approach these problems, and certainly how you approach it in the sense of we're not going to tell you what's going to happen on the front lines of making an interpretation. We're actually going to tell you what your limitations are, and what you can physically do with the data you have. And then let the operator say, all right, if that's the case, we're going to assume to drill here because of some assumption that they want to make. And I love that approach because that's as real as it gets.
I mean, theoretically, of course, the Bayesian way will be helping you a lot, right?
Yeah.
The Bayesian way in that kind of paradigm. You have to be cautious with that because I had unrealistic expectations about the Bayesian inversion when I said, okay, these guys who developed, they say, why can't we apply to this land data with this kind of, and they say, well, the delta is poor. And I say, well, if delta is poor, we'll get big uncertainty. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. If it's poor, it will be infinite uncertainty. So it's not quite like that. But I mean, for me, it's also a learning curve, you know?
Yeah.
Ultimately, I believe, my belief is a poor well tie is not the end of the story, because there's a reason for that. I mean, you have if you believe your logs, then the seismic data is information. Mm-hmm. Now, the 1D well tie may not work, but maybe you can do something better than that. There are reasons why well tie didn't work. So you have to be more creative. I always, maybe you don't know, but I did a postdoc in 1994 with Roy White, who works with Icon now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
He's retired from the university, but he taught me how to do the well ties in 3D and stuff.
That's interesting. So you were able to elevate what you were providing at more of a 2D or a less, not quite 3D yet. He came in, complemented what you kind of were missing. You guys integrated and probably created a phenomenal product.
Hopefully, yeah. Now, this data seismic matching is not really my area. My core area is rock physics itself. But you have to understand where it's all going. And that's the big picture, you know. Right. So even though I work on rocks and samples, but I need to understand what parameters, where it's all going. So I'm going to attend the talks on full waveform inversion. I'm very keen to see what the advances are and how we can use waveform inversion for actually reservoir characterization, not just for velocity estimation.
So, back when you were getting your PhD, right, you're talking about all these ideas are all theoretical, right? Now we're in a state where I'm assuming we're able to prove some of these theoretical ideas. Where do you see rock physics going from here?
Well, I guess I already mentioned one aspect is unconventional reservoirs. The other aspect is much tighter integration with geology. And when I say this, I mean there's a lot of attempts to do that and constrain our inversions with geological information. But the next step is to try to integrate rock physics with the depositional forward modeling. Mm-hmm. So geological, if you like, basin modeling, but on a deposition sort of fast scale, and that's not easy because it's not just deposition, but it's also post-depositional processes, including compaction and all sorts of things. And it won't be able to do that everywhere, but in some cases we are not even doing that. They're not even close.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Our geologic interpretations are pretty far off on what you're asking.
You're talking to a couple geologists, so we know that our interpretations are not spot on, right? So you're constraining your data with, more or less a model that has a lot of flaws in it.
But listen to what I'm saying. If you're a geologist, you will understand. I'm advocating for going beyond the conventional geology and into the process modeling. How this formed mathematical modeling of the geological process. Now these things exist, but they never link to geophysics properly. No, well, structurally they're linked because they use, but not. And I'm advocating the next step in this.
So
I've done some pilot on this.
We got a few minutes left.
Yeah. So that's okay. Yes, fine.
From Russia, there are two interesting things. One, and this is kind of a fork in the road right now, and I'll let you decide where you want to go with it. We don't have to talk about both. But Russia drilled the deepest well ever, and that was a fun subject. And also, Russia's done a lot about the concept of abiotic oil and abiotic hydrocarbons. This other model of how hydrocarbons even are on our planet. And that's interesting, right? Everyone knows that, but that kind of was all put to the side, I guess, eventually. It was an old concept, is that right?
Yeah, I don't know much about it. I met people who were advocating this. I wasn't sure it's just a Russian thing, but I wouldn't be going. But if you say so, maybe you know better because you are in Russia, you don't know. But I'm not really big fan of those theories. Now, the deep coal is a big deal. I'm going back to that. It's an old story, of course, but it's a big deal because you know what happened? I mean, you probably do. But what happened is that they had this basalt layer identified, and then they drilled, and there's nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
And that's eye-opening, not just the basalt layer, but also limitations of geophysics. And you have to be very, very careful with this kind of things.
That was an amazing learning experience, I bet. Have you been to the building that has all the core in it?
No, I haven't. But I worked closely with the people who worked on that in that project.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very
Now,
closely.
so Australia now is what you're working on. Offshore Australia, I'm guessing.
Well, look. My work is not linked to a particular region.
Okay.
So I work with people all around the world, and also still on fundamental aspects. I obviously try to do what I do best. So while I'm keeping a broad perspective about everything is going on, but I'm not. Abandoning what I do best. So still work on the models and stuff. Okay.
How can someone find you and read the papers that you write and stay on the front lines of what you're doing? How does someone contact you?
Oh, I give you email and they can contact me by email. That's the best.
Email's the best. You don't have a website, a company name?
No, I work at Curtin University. They can find me in Curtin University. That's no problem. But if you write Boris Gurevich Geophysics, that will be me.
That's it.
Google. You don't need email. You just find it that way. It's easy.
I got one last question.
Yep, let's hear it.
What was the first area that you worked that a well was drilled? So where was that first well drilled that you helped?
No. Unfortunately, I don't do any of that stuff.
Oh, you don't?
No. There might be my work may underpin some things, but it's a long process, so I'm not working on specific wells and stuff like this.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, That's a good answer, too.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Anything for us, Boris, before we end this show? Do you have any questions for us?
No, I don't think so.
Are you excited about any particular talks? Are you here for any particular objective?
Well, yes, I would like to listen. Well, I would like to listen to talks about unconventional. I want to listen to the FWI talks, and especially elastic FWI. And I would like to see recent advances and road ahead as the big picture things.
Yeah. That's the way to end this thing. All right, Boris. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Dr. Gurevich.
Dr.
Thank you so
Gurevich,
much.
it was an honor.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
you.
It's an honor for me as well. It's interesting. Interesting experience. Thank you.
We're out. We out.